Okay, I think that was, your father and your mother are really incredible people. And I don't know, I'm just thinking again of most kids don't have that kind of wisdom imparted to them growing up. But you were also sharing how in your own life it became a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about in your teen years? Did it become a struggle serving God or wanting to walk away from everything? Did you ever reach that point?
Actually, my teen years were a pretty good time in my life. I went to Rift Valley Academy in Kenya, and it was just an incredible school. We had really good teachers, a lot of activities out of the classroom, a lot of music activities, and different types of clubs such as photography and drama and so forth. So those were really a highlight of my life. And during that time, I made some really good friendships, which continue to this day. I think the shock was coming back to America and getting used to the culture here. That was a little bit of a difficult adjustment.
And how old were you when you came back here?
I was 18 years old. So I lived in Ethiopia from the time I was a baby when we went out until I graduated from high school.
Totally different culture.
Right.
But were you surrounded by British people, or were you submerged in the Ethiopian culture? What was that time like, those first 18 years?
Mm-hmm. When I was home, I was constantly surrounded by the Ethiopian people. I'd walk across the street over to the hospital. There would be throngs of people on the street, and you would just shake hands with everybody and greet them. I would run off to the little houses. My mom wouldn't know where I was, and I would be off in some house, little hut, visiting with the people, sitting around their fire on a little stool and eating the roasted beans or drinking their coffee. So at home, I was completely surrounded by them. When I went away to boarding school, it was mostly other missionary kids that were at the boarding school.
Okay.
But no.
But you had a taste of both cultures.
Right.
But mostly the Ethiopian culture.
Yes.
So at 18, you came back to where? Where did you come back?
To Santa Barbara, to Westmont College. I went to
Okay.
school there, graduated, and then went to Cal Lutheran, got teaching credentials, and taught for 37 years, loved it.
So at that point, at the age of 18, you came here
Right.
to Santa Barbara. You did not go back to Ethiopia, is that correct?
I did not return to Ethiopia until 1975, when I went back to visit my parents.
Okay. And you weren't looking to go back, I'm assuming. Once you were here, you pretty much made your life?
I really didn't want to put my children through what I experienced
Okay.
as a child at that point in my life. I never dreamt of doing any type of missionary work, but I did like to travel.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting, too. So your children, born and raised here, never been on short-term mission, nothing like that?
My son went out to Ethiopia with Jim when Dad was really sick, went out to get him and bring him back home, and also went to Kenya with me. We went back to where I went to high school. That was about 9 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So where are you today now? What's happening today? Let's go back to that, your work today.
When Dad passed away, we just felt like we had to do something. We felt compelled. When we came back here, I couldn't sleep at night. There were so many people with so many needs, and all legitimate needs. And then when we got involved with the Mossy-Foot project, it was a little bit easier because we were focusing on one segment of society where we could make a difference. So there still are people that we know, that we help, but on the whole, we're mostly dealing with the Mossy-Foot project. So when I retired from school teaching in 2005, then I started helping Jim with doing the Mossy-Foot work. And basically what we're doing here is raising the awareness of the disease and the funding so that the work can go on in Ethiopia. And we also do travel to Ethiopia. Last year we were there 4 times, or I was there, Jim and I were there once, and then I was there 3 more times. So we spend a fair amount of time in Ethiopia, but the majority of the time here.
Okay. And I know that your dad was a missionary, medical missionary. So he also not only went and helped the people physically, but also spiritually. What did he do in that area as far as sharing the gospel? was that something that was accepted in Ethiopia, or was there culture at the time? I think it was communist, wasn't it? Or
this was prior to the communist time.
okay.
Actually, people were quite open to hearing the gospel, especially when you're helping them physically, and many times it's a life and death matter. And my dad would always pray for people before he did surgery on them. But my mom was the one who did more sharing of the gospel. She had a gift of languages. She spoke 7 languages fluently. She would go over to the hospital and visit with the patients every day. She did translation work. She had Bible study classes at the house. And she would go to homes and visit in the home and take me along as a little girl. Then later on, when they no longer had a car, they would travel on the buses so that they could take like Gospels of John and sell them for a minimal amount to people and talk with them on the bus.
Okay, and then, I'm thinking that you can help somebody physically, but if their emotional needs aren't met and the spiritual needs aren't met, they're not really whole. And just the fact that your mother would go out and share that and bring these people in, I find that fascinating too. At that point, were you actually in Ethiopia and seeing the disease and already starting to treat it, the mossy foot?
Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, I remember being in the operating room with my dad, watching him do surgery on these people. It was something that he was really interested in, but being the only doctor for about 1 million people, many of those years, he didn't have the time to focus just on one disease. There were so many other things that he was treating also. He had a full surgical load. He was training the Ethiopians to be medical workers. He was making hospital rounds every day, on call for clinic, setting up new clinics out in the countryside that his medical trainees would man. And then sometimes he and my mom would travel several days by mule to find out what an epidemic was and to treat it. So at that time, he was interested in it, and he did treat some people starting back as early as the 50s,
okay,
but really didn't have the time to focus on that until he came back into the country. In 1977, in 1977, the communist government took over the hospitals. They left, they went to Central African Republic and Zaire. So my parents were out of the country for 20 years.
Oh, okay. Now I'm getting the picture here.
Yeah.
Your father must have been a man with so much energy and strength and passion. I find that so incredible. And I can see that you and your husband now have that same passion. Maybe your calling's different. You don't have the medical skills that your dad had, but it's just so interesting to see how you are now picking up that baton and moving forward with that. Your mother, let's talk about her a little bit, because your dad does seem to get a lot of attention, but it sounds like your mother, a woman that spoke seven languages. Where did she grow up in?
She grew up in Oregon and also in Portland. And when she was in high school, well, first of all, it was rather interesting. She went to a church, but she never heard the gospel there. She never knew that Jesus died for her sins. And her aunt was visiting. And my mom was quite concerned about her condition and knowing that she wasn't perfect and couldn't be. And her aunt said, "Doris, didn't you hear that Jesus died for your sins? And you don't need to worry about that. You know, he can take care of you." So at that time, my mom believed in Christ, and she had a passion from that time on to share Jesus with other people. Then when she was in high school, she didn't know how she was going to afford to be able to go to college, but definitely was talented and wanted to go. And she picked up a brochure at church one time, and it said that anybody who was like in the top 3% of their class could get a scholarship at Redlands University. So she applied to Redlands University and was accepted and went to school there. She was 16 years old. They had a little tradition that the new girls in the freshman class would serenade the guys at their dorm. So they were walking around singing, carrying candles. my dad looked out the balcony and noticed my mom right away. She's a beautiful girl with long red hair and green eyes, and he just really wanted to meet her. So that's where my folks met. From the time my mom accepted the Lord, she was interested in missions. And from the time that my dad met his uncle, who was a missionary doctor in China, when he was 5 years old, he wanted to be a missionary doctor. So it's interesting how their two lives met there at Redlands.
You know, I keep saying but I keep hearing your story. It's just so fascinating to me because, like I said in the beginning of this show, that my growing up years were so different. You know, I was sent to Catholic schools, but that nothing was ever lived out at home. And my parents are great, but a little crazy and eccentric. So I love your story. Treasure it, treasure it. And you out there that might be raising children right now, I just think what the biggest legacy I think you could give your children is to love them and love each other, first off, the parents, and love the Lord and love your children and train them up in the things of God. You know, we're running out of time for this show, and I hope you're getting a picture of what the Mossy Foot Project is, what it is to be faithful, and have a passion for what you're doing. But we're going to come back. We'll do another show where we can talk more about the project itself and really get into the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of the ministry work that you're doing. So thank you, Sharon. Would you be able to share with our audience if you have any thought that you would like to impart before we go off here? And we'll also make sure we have the your website where people can get in contact with you.
Right. It's just really a pleasure to be able to serve God and to do what He has put on our hearts. I never dreamt that we would be doing this, but He has just put us right in that place. We went out, visited my dad at a time that was crucial, and we can just see how He got us involved in what we're doing. And it's not at all a hardship, it's a joy. The whole time I'm in Ethiopia, I'm just wired, and just thank God that He's let us do this, that we have the pleasure of being able to be involved in this. So I'd say, whatever God calls you to do, whether it is ministering to people who are your neighbors or in your neighborhood or in your city, just do it with pleasure and with gratitude that God has given you the ability to do that, and that He will equip you to do whatever He calls you to do. So look up our website, www.mossyfoot.com. It will give you more information about the Mossy Foot Project and what we're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, and thank you all for watching.
Awake in the passion.